Welcome back, Nuggets. This mother clucker's got some thoughts. Let's ruffle some feathers and get into this video. And if you would like to support my tiny pullet of a channel, don't forget to like, subscribe, go follow me on one of my other platforms, just in case something happens. That's where I can be in communication with you all. And go check out my other videos while you're here. My Nuggets. Oh, do I have an interesting video for you. Now, we have not one, but two juicy depositions that have been partially unsealed that we're going to go through today. I will do a TLDR at the end for those of you who don't like to really get into the nitty-gritty details. But for those of you who love to hear this kind of stuff line by line, I've got you. I'm here for you. Let's get into it. So the first deposition we're going to go through is of none other than that quote-unquote TikTok employee. The quote-unquote Eugenia is a barn burner. If you don't remember, she was actually referenced in the first legal document that I ever went through. The unredacted version, I think, is on the second video I did on this, but she was basically the one that had done the deposition back in February of 2025. So this is actually before the whole Mother's Day incident went down. And Eugenia featured quite heavily in her deposition. Now, the disappointing thing about this particular document is that there are possibly hundreds of pages that are still redacted and completely under seal because TikTok has managed to justify that in some way, shape, or form. And the actual reference to barn burner specifically is in the redacted section. However, there were still some really interesting points in this particular deposition that I want to go through. And then the second one that we go through is, quite frankly, horrifying to me. So this particular document is basically called the Amended Exhibit 492, which is hundreds and hundreds of pages of this particular employee's deposition. As I said, look, originally her name was redacted. I don't at all want any of this to result in any communication or any hate directed at any of the people that we talk about here. You know, I think the fact that they're going through this and, you know, the legal system is doing what the legal system does, that's more than enough. So please just keep this as information. Don't use it as an onus to go out and communicate with these people. So because it's been completely made public record as far as I'm concerned, and I'm allowed to use her name, but this entire deposition originally completely under seal. And yeah, we're going to have a look at some of it. Now, this employee in question is part of the trust and safety partnerships at TikTok. And as far as I can tell, actually still works with TikTok at present time. And I found this really interesting because in that original document that we went through, it was actually the TikTok's trust and safety team section that was completely redacted. And it said that this team was completely unaware that TikTok had hired Ms. Cooney as a paid influencer. And when trust and safety employees learned about the relationship, the team voiced shock and quote, "Wow, her being managed by us." And so this particular employee, I didn't realize quite at the time, it was confusing in the way it was written. She is actually quite senior in this particular team. So just an example here of what I mean by that there are a lot of pages that are still heavily redacted, because this is actually the third page of this document that I've gotten my hands on, but you can see that it's actually referencing page 17. So all of the previous pages are completely missing, and that happens throughout, and I have no way of knowing exactly how many pages are still under seal. And as an example here, that it can be quite frustrating because the plaintiff's lawyer asked this employee Do you think it's important to protect kids who use TikTok? And then there's just pages and pages and pages missing. I think it's kind of important that we have that kind of information personally, but TikTok has clearly been able to justify why it should still be sealed. Does that mean that it's going to be permanently sealed? No, it doesn't, but I'm going to keep my ear to the ground and see what comes out of this anyway. Now, the way this deposition is going to be written and the parts that we're going to go through is basically the plaintiff's lawyer asking her questions and then she responds. So you're going to see Q and then A, right? And I'll just say as well that in these court proceedings, they ask and re-ask these questions in slightly different ways with like one word changed at a time, and they'll keep reiterating, which you can kind of understand that means that it can't be misinterpreted, it can't be seen to be leading and things like that. And sometimes there's objections that come up from the other side, so they have to rephrase it. I'm going to simplify all of that down into just the most direct questions. Does that necessarily represent the entire court proceeding? No, but does it give us enough information to put these puzzle pieces together? Absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of this can be, a little bit of common sense can be applied to it, basically. Okay, so question. Miss McCullough, this is a demonstrative showing the images from the TMZ article we just looked at with stills from some of her videos. Do you see that? She answers, yes. It's one page. Is that right? What we're looking at. I'm sorry. I mean, clearly she's a little bit off kilter while she's answering these things. Now, the section that they're looking at is basically this page here, and it shows, I mean, we're all familiar with these photos, aren't we? But the most important thing that I'll call your attention to is the little snip at the top. And it says, hey, Victoria, I forgot if I mentioned this to you, but it turns out that the problematic conditions account, Eugenia Cooney, is actually managed by us and a part of a live programming we do and is in the Creator Fund. So this is basically a snip from the previous video that I did. There was a big document outlining all of their communications, and this was letting this particular employee know, who is in the trust and safety team, that they are actively managing Eugenia. Now, you'll note that I've blurred a whole lot of things out throughout all this video. The AI moderation in YouTube can now read, so I can't even just leave it on the screen, but if anything's blurred, just know it's in direct relation to her particular condition. And I'm sure that with a little bit of context, you'll know exactly what's going on. Question. Okay, in an earlier message, Redacted referred to this account as a problematic conditions account, right? Victoria responded, yes, I believe she did. Question. And again, right, another TikTok employee is calling this a problematic conditions account, reflecting that the account is managed by TikTok and part of TikTok's Creator Fund, right? Answer, yes, that's what it says here. So the lawyer is basically presenting that this employee of the trust and safety team is aware of these communications and this document, and is basically setting the scene that the trust and safety team did in fact know that this was a problematic account. Question. In your second message, you send the link to Redacted with the TMZ article that includes the images we were just looking at, right? Answer, yes, that's correct. Question, okay, in response to the TMZ article, Redacted says, Jesus, right? Answer, yes, he does. So even the internal communications between the TikTok employees are shocked. And I don't know if any of you remember the first time you laid eyes on Eugenia, because I think that it's really easy to get desensitized when you're looking at it all the time, and it just kind of becomes, well, that's just her. But these are people who are witnessing this for the first time, and they're in shock. And what's more is they're in shock that they are, as a company, actively managing her and promoting her. Question. Okay, he goes on to say, so many questions, but I see the challenge. I suppose it doesn't qualify as SGC or highly imitable dangerous conduct, right? Answer, yes, that's what he says. Question, And what does SCG mean? Answer: it stands for shocking and graphic content. So the other employee that Victoria is conversing with in that document is basically saying, yeah, it's shocking. We're clearly shocked by this, but it doesn't actually qualify as shocking and graphic content, right? And if you bear in mind the time that they were talking about this, if you saw my last video, the timing that they were discussing this was actually well before her Mother's Day incident issue, and they were actually trying to make a concerted effort to remove her from the platform, but they felt like they had no legally safe route to do so because it wasn't at that time against policy. It is now, but it wasn't then. Question: can you explain to the jury what kind of content would qualify as shocking and graphic content? Because my nuggets, I'm guessing that all of you are sitting there thinking about Eugenia right now and going, yes, that is shocking and graphic content. Answer: in my time, I didn't network as closely on this, but around this particular issue area. But from what I understand, this could mean things like blood or gore, or it's, any kind of content that sort of has those types of violent characteristics, that kind of thing. It could qualify as shocking and graphic content under our community guidelines. So the thing that you probably need to keep in mind here is with both of these depositions that we're going to go through, these people have clearly been trained, and probably trained extensively, as to how they can conduct themselves within the courtroom. And a lot of this is they only admit to what they really have to admit to, as in what is being put directly into their faces. And if there is any shred of doubt, they'll say things like, not to my knowledge, or not as far as I know, that kind of thing. And so you can really see her trying to talk around this topic because obviously Eugenia's situation is shocking and graphic content. And in this particular paragraph, you can really see her going back and forth on it, because at the time that they were trying to get rid of her, it wasn't against the policies and it wasn't included in those policies. But now, at the time of her deposition, it was. So she is aware of it, but she's also trying to play the card of, well, no, I'm not really aware of it. I didn't network closely on this particular area, that kind of thing. I understand why they do it. I understand that it's not their fault. It's what they're told to do. And I would imagine that to a certain degree, their job might even be on the line. And I don't know. You gotta be able to sleep at night with your decisions though, don't you? Question: okay, and so Redacted is saying his view is it doesn't fall under this category, right? Answer: that seems to be what he's saying here. Question: okay, he goes on to say, and quote, in any case, it seems we should divest monetarily if it doesn't violate our guidelines. What about that other group, Feed Integrity or something like that? End quote. Did I read that correctly? Answer: that's what it looks like he says here, yes. Question: when he's saying we should divest monetarily, he's referring to TikTok, right? Answer: yes, I believe so. Question: okay, so this would be to stop providing Ms. Cooney with funding from the Creator Fund, right? Answer: I believe so, yes. Question: okay, and in response to Redacted, you say sharing the memo Redacted and Redacted worked on. Did you see that? And what they're talking about here is basically the entire video that I did on this one single document, my last Eugenia video. So if you didn't see that, it's definitely worth looking at it. Because they're now referencing the justification to remove Eugenia Cooney from Creative Fund / TikTok management. And this became a direct exhibit for this particular deposition. Now, the rest of the information in this deposition is basically them going through this document one by one and having her go, yes, that's what it says. Yes, that's what it says. So it's completely redundant. Basically, this employee, who is relatively high up in the trust and safety team, Like, can you believe that? Anyway, it's basically having her acknowledge that everything in that document is accurate and factual to the best of her knowledge. And yeah, go watch my last video on this if you want to know more about this document. It was quite interesting. And it was basically TikTok trying to cut Eugenia out in a way that they couldn't be sued for it, I suppose, is probably the end of that story. Now, the second deposition I wanted to run through, and this one is where it gets juicy, my nuggets. This is amended exhibit 672. And it is basically a transcript of a videotaped deposition of one Andrew Tomlinson. Now, this man has completely wiped his presence on the internet. I can't find a single thing about him. He's not on LinkedIn. There's no articles about him. He's just gone. All you can find are those like weird sites like White Pages and stuff where they kind of try and piece together people's movements. That got me interested. I don't know if he's still an employee at TikTok, but once I started getting in and pulling the actual questions from this, I can see exactly why he's wiped his entire presence online. And just to clarify, I don't know if it was before or after this deposition. I don't know if it was advised to him to do this. Maybe he was just like this anyway. But the way he conducts himself, and this is why I say it's really important that we're not directing hate in anybody's direction, but the way he conducts himself in this deposition is gross. It's nothing short of disgusting. And if you're a parent who has a teen or a child, or even if you're a vulnerable person yourself who has been impacted by Eugenia's presence online, you're not going to be happy with this. So, yes, smart on his behalf. So I'm just first going to run a little bit through what his role was in this, and then we're going to get into the specifics of his deposition. A lot of it was still redacted, but a lot of stuff surrounding Eugenia was available, and specifically talking about the complaints, user complaints, so like every time somebody sends a report and things like that, how they were dealt with and managed, and yes, super fun. And a really important thing that is on this document that I wanted you to note is the date, October 1st, 2025. This is after the Mother's Day incident. This may have been because of the additional discovery that the plaintiffs demanded and won because of that incident. So this is the person that needs to basically answer for why all of those user complaints had been ignored. Question. Okay, if we look under professional experience, your current position is, quote, TikTok user operations manager. Is that correct? Answer. That's correct. Question. You've been in that role since June of 2020? Answer. I've been in that role specifically for about 2 or 3 years now. Question. And if you look a couple of bullet points down under your description, it says, quote, led and developed 7 user support leads across 7 diverse network streams. Do you see that? Answer, I do. Question, and if you look at the next bullet point down, it says, quote, engineered a comprehensive ticketing system. Do you see that? Answer, I do. Question, is that a ticketing system used for responding to feedback you get from users of TikTok? Answer, that's correct. So this is the man who has basically made the entire reporting system of TikTok. I'm not sure to what extent that goes because he's talking about 7 different diverse work streams. I'm not clear on what the specifics of that are, but you can see that this guy has his finger on the pulse of this entire reporting system. In fact, he's the lead of it. Question, and below it says, quote, implemented targeted user training programs, end quote. Do you see that? Answer, I do. Question, and is that training program for training TikTok's user support staff to respond to feedback they get from clients? Answer, that's correct. New hires and additional trainings that need to happen for our teams. So he's not only led and developed these systems and processes, but he's also in charge of targeted user training. So all of the people who are actually monitoring these reports that come through from Eugenia's account, he's the one that's been training them, or at least he's the one that's been constructing the training material to give to the trainers that train them. So he is so at the head of this particular department. It's ludicrous. It's going to be, I think, uncomfortable for you to hear what he has to say in the rest of this deposition. Question, and is it your position that that improved productivity? Answer, it is my position and what I have been responsible for when time to update our support processes to deliver on those things. Question, and did it allow your staff to move more quickly through user complaints? Answer, I believe so. So it's interesting to note that this is still very much talking about humans monitoring these complaints. There's no discussion around AI at this point, or even bots doing it at this point. And I find that interesting because, as with some other platforms, the turnaround on decisions can be very rapid. And I almost wonder if what he's done, because, KRAs, KPIs, whatever you want to call them, his performance statistics will be linked around saving the company of TikTok money overall, right? Because if you can devise a system that gets through all of those user complaints in a way that is cheaper for TikTok to achieve over time, then that's what he'll be pushing for. It's not necessarily pushing for the safety of the users or the benefit of the users. And I think that's what's really important here to note, because everything that he's talked about so far has been time of things and delivery of things and the effectiveness and efficiency of it. So at no point so far has it talked about the safety of users or the well-being of users. And it's an insight into how corporates can work, because while the previous deposition and the previous video that I did, those documents, those people were all focused on optics, right? We need to make sure that TikTok is being seen to do the right things. TikTok is protecting its viewers, whereas this guy is all about time, efficiency, money, right? So the key takeaway for this is basically, he's the guy who oversees how TikTok handles user complaints, the reporting system. He sees the complaints, trains the teams, manages the systems. Keep that in mind as we go through. So now we're going to get into some, and bear in mind that the last document that we went through, there were over 80,000 user complaints about Eugenia's account in a very exquisitely short space of time. I think I worked it out to it must have been a good 250 reports per day. So they've selected just a handful and are basically going to be presenting them to this guy, the operations lead, and getting some information out of him. Question. This user communication to TikTok and ByteDance is from August of 2020, correct? Answer. Correct. Question. The user is reporting a TikTok account, right? Answer, yes. Question, an account that they say is promoting conditions, right? Answer, based on their feedback they shared with us. And I know that his answers are going to become quite annoying because it's always, yes, based on the feedback they shared, or yes, that's what they wrote there, or that's what they said, things like that. And this is why I say, I think this guy was doing his job. I think he was doing his job as it was allocated by the person above him. I think he needed to have a little bit more perspective on the world and what he was potentially doing to people. But ultimately, I don't think this is the villain here. And it is worth keeping that in mind, and why I'm just being so specific about don't share hate. I think some of his actions are inexcusable. I really do. And I think the way that he phrases some of these things is also unethical at best. But I do think that that's what he was trained to say. I think it's what he was told to say. And I think this guy specifically could have made a very easy scapegoat for TikTok. I think to give this guy the benefit of the doubt, the buck shouldn't stop with him. It's the company in its entirety that has an issue. Unfortunately, this guy is the one that got called forward for the deposition. So that's my 2 cents. Question. They say that the user posted an image of Eugenia Cooney, correct? Answer. I do see that. Question. Are you familiar with Ms. Cooney? Answer. I'm not. This pricked my little chicken jellies up. I don't know what chicken jellies are. I don't I don't know. But this caught my attention because you're telling me you are the lead of basically the entire department that handles user complaints, and you want to tell me that you aren't familiar with that name. And it gets even worse because he's provably lying here when they say, question, I'll give you a moment to review that. So they've given him some images and some complaint profiles and all of that kind of thing. Answer, thank you. Question, does this refresh your recollection of who Ms. Cooney is? Answer, this person looks familiar to me. Question, does this person look familiar to you as a TikTok influencer? Answer, I have seen them. I didn't recall the name. So the issue that I have here is because this person is the lead of operations of the reporting department, you want to tell me that somebody who is receiving a whole lot of user complaints in text form will recognize her image but not her name? This does not add up to me. And even if you were getting images, repeated images of somebody who looks the way Eugenia does, you want to tell me that the name has not been associated with that? The lawyer let it go, but I don't think that in the previous one where he said, are you familiar with Ms. Cooney? I am not. Absolutely not, sir. I don't believe a single moment of that. I think you know exactly who she was. I think you just felt in that moment that you had enough wiggle room to play the ignorance card as you've been taught. But he recognizes her image and now he acknowledges that that is Eugenia. Question, but not only are they showing images of her, they are referring to Ms. Cooney as the, quote, blueprint. Do you see that? Answer, I do see that feedback. Now, this was a little bit confusing to me, but when the lawyer there is saying they are referring to Ms. Cooney, he's talking about the user complaint. So whatever account had reported Eugenia's channel, that's them. That's who they're talking about. So the account who reported Ms. Cooney is calling her a blueprint. And it continues. Question. Now, a blueprint is commonly used to refer to a model or a guide for others to follow, right? And there was some back and forth, but we eventually got out of him answer based on their feedback. Question. Then the user provides methods for achieving this ideal body, right? Answer. They're sharing the user at the top of the screen and then or at the top of the feedback and referencing what they're promoting and how to do that. I'm sorry. I guess he's apologizing for. He sounds a little bit nervous. I don't know. I mean, it's difficult to tell from just a transcript, but there's a lot of very fragmented sentences with this particular person. It would be intimidating. I imagine this would be very stressful, and I don't know what kind of environment TikTok fosters as a work environment either, and potentially he's not feeling super good about his position at this point. I don't know. It's speculation. I cannot verify. Question. The user suggests a certain action associated with this condition, yourself, or another action after meals, and quote, not stopping until you can see your internal structure, shall we say, my nuggets. It's very difficult to censor some of this for YouTube, but none of this is appropriate. I feel like if you're looking at the screen at the moment, you can work out what these words are. Do you see that in this report? Answer, I do see that feedback. Question, can we agree that that action, yourself, can be harmful, right? Answer, eating is definitely healthy for you, so the opposite is not the answer. I have some problems with this. Obviously, I have some problems with this. I'm imagining some of you have some problems with this as well. He's caught himself in a position where he really has to acknowledge that that is the case, but he's done it in such a back to front way. And that's why I say it's difficult, because he's really not helping himself. And see why I say he absolutely should have removed himself from the internet? I don't think this would have gone down well with anybody. Question. Sure, we can agree that that action in yourself can be harmful to children, right? Answer. Based on my understanding. Question. The user says this is harmful because it promotes conditions, right? Answer. That's what they shared in their feedback. Question. And they demand that the account is taken down immediately. Do you see that? Answer. I do see that in their feedback. Question. Because it could affect younger users on the app, right? Answer. Based on their feedback here. So this person is not only outlining that Eugenia is a, quote, blueprint because people are using her to inspire, certain inspiration, telling them how to do it, and also saying that it's harmful to vulnerable persons and minors, and they want the account taken down. So this is a very well articulated complaint. And this is the sort of thing that this man's department was receiving. And I know many of you have reported her accounts on various platforms as well. And this is the sort of thing that these social media platforms are receiving. Question. As early as 2020, TikTok and ByteDance had reports that Eugenia Cooney was being depicted as the blueprint for the ideal body type, correct? Answer. Based on their feedback here, they shared with us in this image. Couldn't just say, yes, that's what that person's saying, but no. I know it's all just legal stuff. I get it. I really do. It's still frustrating. Hard to look at it as a human, really, and take it in for what it is, especially if you are or have known somebody who has been affected by accounts like this. Question. This person has had so much influence that they are directly impacting others to relapse from their conditions, correct? Answer. Based on their feedback. Question. And this person is Eugenia Cooney, right? Answer. I see their reference of Eugenia Cooney. Question. Promoting conditions is against TikTok's community guidelines, is it not? Bearing in mind, this is in October of 2025. The changes to their policy, I believe, came in 2024. I might need to search that up again. I remember it happening very distinctly, actually. And then the lawyer continues on, you can answer if you don't know. Answer, I would need to look at the community guidelines. So you're telling me, my nuggets, this man is trying to sell to us that the lead of operations of the complaints and reporting department does not know community guidelines? Really? I mean, these community guidelines are not lengthy. They're really not. Like, you can get into the weeds with it if you want to get into very specific definitions and examples of things. But when it comes to this particular policy, it's very easy to understand. In fact, all of the policies are quite easy to understand, and they do that on purpose so that users know what they are and can research them easily. I don't believe this. I am sorry. I am speculating. I can't prove it. I think this is a lie, in my humble opinion. Question. Has TikTok or ByteDance ever informed users, parents, or the public that in 2020, a user reported that Eugenia Cooney was promoting conditions on the TikTok platform? Answer. Not to my knowledge. So no information is going out to parents or the public or anybody, really, that this kind of thing is going on. And that actually would have been a really good preliminary step for these social media platforms to take, right? To send out mass information to parents saying, you need to watch what your children are doing because we know that these accounts pop up and we don't want anybody who is vulnerable to accidentally stumble on these kinds of things that might cause extremely long-term damage to people, but they don't want to do that because that might dissuade people from using their platform, which loses their money. And so let's just ignore it. Let's just ignore it for like a good 5 years and then we can come back to it. Question. At the bottom, do you see the response that was sent back to the reporter? Answer, I do see that. So this is after that report had been filed by this user, and now we're getting a response back from TikTok to that user. Question, this response tells the reporter how to block Eugenia Cooney's account, right? Answer, it also shares information about how to report accounts as well. But yes, there is a reference of blocking in the feedback. And that's completely redundant information at that point because this is a report that's been filed. So why would they need further information on how to file a report? And rather than TikTok responding and saying anything along the lines of that it will be investigated and it'll be sent to a team or anything like that, it just says, no, just block this account. You just block this account, which is very much treating the symptom and not the problem. And this is the result of this efficient and timely system that this man has created in order for complaints to be dealt with en masse. And that's basically TikTok to turn around and say, here's how you block an account. That's the solution. That's it. Question, the response does not say that TikTok will delete Eugenia's account, does it? Answer, based on this feedback that this team replied with, the team that he trained, just gonna say, it does not. Yeah. You constructed the systems. You constructed the training material. You at least facilitated the training of the teams that are going to handle the feedback and reports and the complaints. And you're sitting there saying that this is what you've created. It just tells you to block. It doesn't say that they will at all look into it and delete it. No. Question. So TikTok did not delete Ms. Cooney's account, did they? Spoiler alert, my nuggets, it's still up. It's still in that weird holding pattern, and it probably will be for some time, but it's still there. Answer, not to my knowledge. Question. This is another complaint about Ms. Cooney, correct? So they've moved on to another one. Answer, they do reference Ms. Cooney. Question, this user says they blocked Ms. Cooney's account, right? Answer, they do reference that. Question, they blocked her account because they, quote, do not want to see someone promoting severe conditions and self-harming behavior, correct? Answer, based on what they're sharing here. And this is about to get slightly horrifying about the way their systems work. Question, the user informs TikTok and ByteDance that they are continuously blocking Ms. Cooney's page, right? Answer, they do say that they feel like they're continuously blocking the page. Question, the user has also continuously used the not interested button for Ms. Cooney's videos, right? Answer, that's what they've shared. Question, this user is telling TikTok and ByteDance that by allowing Ms. Cooney to have an account, they are enabling her own unhealthy lifestyle, right? Answer, based on the feedback that's written here. Question, and this user believes Ms. Cooney will ultimately pass from her condition, correct? Answer, that's what they've shared. Question, this user says, quote, we cannot allow this to continue. We are watching her literally pass in real time. Do you see that? Answer, I do see that. Question, this complaint says TikTok does not tolerate condition promotions, but you continue to allow the world to view Eugenia Cooney. Did I read that correctly? Answer, you did. Question, this user points out that the promotion of conditions violates TikTok's community guidelines, correct? Answer, they're referencing what TikTok does and does not tolerate, which could be alluded to the community guidelines. Now, Sir has some information about what and what isn't community guidelines. Moving on. Question, this user also wants Ms. Cooney banned from TikTok, correct? Answer, based on what they're sharing here. Question, because Ms. Cooney promotes conditions, right? Answer, based on what they're sharing here. Question, they say she's harmful to minors. Do you see that? Answer, I do see that. Thank you. The lawyer then says, could we underline, quote, she is harmful to minors, please? Question, she is harmful to minors because she's promoting conditions, right? Answer, based on what they wrote. Question, then the user identifies exactly what section of the community guidelines Ms. Cooney is violating, correct? Answer: I do see that they reference the community guidelines and reference a specific section. Question: they say she's violating the specific policy that we're talking about. My nuggets, I can't really say any of it. And quote, unhealthy body image sections of the community guidelines, correct? Answer: based on what they've provided. So yet another really articulate complaint. And what turned up in that section was that although that person had repeatedly referenced community guidelines, despite that person repeatedly saying not interested in this page, despite that person repeatedly blocking the account, for some reason, it didn't stay blocked and continued to turn up in their feed. And there's literally nothing that any user report could say, how much more specific can you get? Because clearly that particular complaint was even after the policy changes, where it was clear that Eugenia was in breach. And this is really showing how much these companies know, how much they're acknowledging, and how much they're just turning a blind eye to, all in the name of money. And this is the horrifying side of what happens when corporations are in control of what our vulnerable population sees. Question: this is another complaint about Ms. Cooney, correct? Answer: correct. Question: the user says they submitted 2 reports for Ms. Cooney's account, right? Answer: I do see that. Question: and from what I've seen, my nuggets, 2 is very small for somebody to have done. Question: they reported her twice because she's glorifying conditions, right? Answer: based on what they've shared here. Question: they say her glorification of conditions, quote, has been incredibly damaging to young girls for years. And I just want to say here, my nuggets, I know that people do tend to focus on the female demographic with these sorts of things, but this absolutely should not be written like this. I understand that it's just a user, it's not somebody who's educated, but it's really important that we also focus on the male side of the demographic that is also damaged by this sort of thing. It continues on. Sorry, little side quest there. Do you see that? Answer: I do see that. The lawyer says, can we please underline damaging to young girls for years? Is it no wonder, by the way, that YouTube and Meta lost this lawsuit? Now, this actual complaint was unredacted for some reason. Just this one, no others. I don't know if it's actually a glitch, because this is from a very lengthy spreadsheet of all of those, hundreds of thousands of complaints that they've got. But this one was unredacted. And I just want to read it to you now. Bear in mind, this one is not very nice to listen to. This person, and this is in direct relation to the one that they were just talking about. Quote, I have submitted 2 reports for Eugenia Cooney for her glorification of conditions, which has been incredibly damaging to young girls for years. Not one human on your team decided to click her account and review her content. No, instead you let a computer do it and tell me her account isn't in violation? Are you kidding me? I have attached 4 screenshots in which she flashes off her horribly, I redacted that word, body in an attempt to be sexy, not only sexualizing her condition, but denying she has one. And I feel like this comment really captures what a lot of us have been saying for quite some time, because it does seem like the speed of the responses, it really does seem like that it's not a human at the other side, or at the very least, it's an underpaid human who is not looking at the right things and perhaps doesn't understand the gravity of what this kind of thing can do. But those kind of responses that if you've reported on pretty much any system, if you even get a response, it is saying that we've reviewed it and there's been no issues, so here's how to block it. That is a standard response for this kind of thing. Whether or not it is directly a computer, because this particular thing was not brought up in the deposition that I can see. I don't know, maybe they go into it in the unredacted sections, like, was it really humans? Because this dude's sitting here saying he's trained these people, so that implies there's humans, yet the responses seem like there aren't humans. So whether that comes out down the track or not, of course I'm going to keep looking at it, but it's concerning. Okay, so for my conclusion, my TLDR, if you're rejoining us from the beginning, here's what we went through. There are two depositions that were partially unredacted, and I really do genuinely hope that more of it gets unredacted, especially since the first deposition doesn't reference that barn burner conversation. I would really love to read that. And by the way, barn burner, apparently it's a Texasism. I had my US Nuggets inform me, and it's something that would be over the top or a successful event, an over the top event, that kind of thing. So barn burner would usually be used as a positive thing, yet this team was using it to describe Eugenia's account, which is kind of gross when you think of it from that perspective. And that was the quote trust and safety team that was saying that. And so we did confirm that the trust and safety team were involved in those communications that I went through in my last video surrounding basically them trying to get Eugenia off the platform, which sounds a lot more positive than it actually was. If you haven't seen it, I do encourage you to go watch it. And then we had the deposition from the lead TikTok user operations manager, the guy who literally wrote and constructed the systems that manage these user complaints, the hundreds of thousands of user complaints that have come in about Eugenia. And he's trained the staff that handle them. And all those staff are doing, if it is actually people, even looking at it in the first place, which we can't actually prove, all these people are doing is ticking a button that says no policy violations, that then sends out a piece of communication to these people who have reported her account saying, here's how to block her account, and nothing more. Nothing about deleting it, nothing about even when users are specifically pointing to parts of the policy that she is in breach of, not even any acknowledgement of that. And what's more, these systems don't have any ability to escalate either. So you can't go, I'm not happy with this decision, let me appeal it or let me escalate it to the next level up. There's no ability to do that. It's just TikTok is able to go, yeah, we've looked at it, no, we good. And then they find themselves in a lawsuit like this. And like I say, when we're dealing with a very large corporate company, sometimes these different departments really have trouble talking to each other. And that's why it's supposed to be like this, almost like a family tree, where it's breaking down into the levels. They're supposed to speak to their superior who is speaking to other superiors that are on their level, and it's supposed to all come together, but that's oftentimes not what happens in corporations. So you've got this trust and safety team who's going, yeah, wow, this is actually going to be a problem. We need to be seen to be doing the right thing. TikTok needs to look clean. Doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to be clean, just needs to look clean. And then you've got this other side of operations where all of the emphasis is put on efficiency and time and money, and we're going to put in these new and ingenious systems that are going to help us process everything in a timely manner, and really all that gets put out is just, no, we're just going to ignore all the complaints, essentially. So, and all of that just winds up leading to basically where we are here. Eugenia is still on the platform, demonetized completely, but still on the platform. She's not posting. She's in a weird holding pattern that I think will be there, especially now that we've had Snap and TikTok settle the civil bellwether cases. We had Facebook and YouTube lose the civil bellwether cases. And then in a couple of months, we'll actually be seeing the federal bellwether cases start, which are the school districts. And considering how these civil ones have gone, I don't think that's going to look super good for them on the federal ones either. And yet, Eugenia's stuff is all still up there. And yet, when I log into TikTok, it's still showing me all of the Eugenia adjacent content, and some little tiny insignificant changes have been made, but ultimately I don't know how much hope I hold for this overhaul. I really think this social media regulation is way overdue. I mean, decades pretty much decades overdue. As soon as it came onto the scene and as soon as it boosted in popularity, there should have been regulations starting to be made. And we are seeing that. Like I say, there's age restrictions now in the EU, UK, and Australia, and maybe some other countries that I don't know about as well. But ultimately, those age restrictions have been proven to be a joke anyway, because at least in Australia, these companies have been found to be not complying with the requirements either. So what does it all mean? Time will tell. I hope you found that interesting. I really enjoy going through all of these documents, and I'm going to continue looking for more that come out as well. But if there's a particular aspect or if you have any questions, do let me know, because digging through and hunting for all of these little documents has become a real passion piece for me. It's definitely my favorite kind of video that I do. But if you're still here listening to me, thank you so much. I appreciate each and every one of you. And an extra big thank you to all of my cluckers. You make my world go round. And don't forget, all financially supporting nuggets, whether it is on YouTube, Patreon, or Twitch, you now have access to a Discord. You just need to link your account to that. And if you have trouble linking your account, shoot me a friend request on Discord. I'm Vera the Chook, and I'll invite you in. It's a lot of fun. We've already started a watch party, and there's a whole bunch of people in there already having great conversations. It's a fun place. I was hesitant about Discord in the beginning. I'm feeling good about it at the moment. But that's all the clucks I have left to give. Stay golden, my little nuggets, and I'll catch you next time.
Hey! Hey! I'm gonna go watch another video. Let's go!